Hey you guys, this is Professor Vitt, and I'm here to walk you through what is definitely the funnest part of the course, and this is your final project. And so I want to say a couple of things. First of all, I want you guys to have fun with this project. You've worked really hard, online classes are difficult, and I want you to take a moment to enjoy the fact that although this is a final project worth 10% of your grade, this will not be the toughest thing you've done in this class by far. You should find this kind of fun and enjoyable and a great way to close the class. That's usually how people feel about it. So, to start off, I just want to point out our quote. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. So this is from Hamlet. And the idea here goes right to the core of this course, which is that sometimes we have ideas, we have preconceptions, and those preconceptions prevent us from discovering new things in the world. So what I want you to do is to find something fun, some kind of extraordinary claim, right, for the class. Maybe it's something that you saw on YouTube or you've heard passed around in your family, I don't know, but some kind of paranormal topic. So, and what you'll do is you'll present on this topic. Now, present, I'll get to exactly what that means in a second, but you have lots of different options here. I would encourage you to just start Googling and looking at some of these. If none of them sound interesting, I've given you some new resources here. Astonishing Legends, a great podcast that covers topics in excruciating detail. The Lore podcast is absolutely excellent, but the Lore podcast is also very, very, very graphic and at times disturbing. Not because the host is sadistic, but because he covers these topics that are kind of scary. And so if you have a little bit of a tummy like I do, I'd be careful with Lore because there are times where I just cannot handle it. Monster Talk is a lot of fun. It's a science-based podcast about paranormal mysteries. And The Unexplained by Howard Hughes. This is another podcast by Howard Hughes, who is in Britain. He is a lifelong fan of the paranormal, and he always is very fair to guests who come on. So, and it's just a kick in the pants to listen to him. So let me just say, if you're looking for materials and none of these that I mention up here are useful to you, then I would encourage you to use some of these other resources to find something, or just Google something, paranormal or unexplained mystery. You'll see some of these topics up here. I have little notes on them. Tupac Shakur, always a classic, right? Is Tupac alive? You can do your presentation on whether or not he's alive or dead. You look at the evidence, weigh whether it's good or whether it meets the burden of proof, and come out and conclude. There's also homeopathy, magnet therapy. John Titor, he's a famous time travel figure. Man on the Moon conspiracies, Illuminati, black helicopters. You can do anything in cryptozoology, from chupacabra to the Mongolian death worm to the orang pendek, anything you'd like. The Skull of Doom is very good. It's kind of a mysterious story about a crystal skull and its origins. Is it made by the Aztecs many generations ago, or is it a modern artifact? People argue about this. So there are lots of different topics that you can choose from. Now, where would you get the stuff that you need in order to do a presentation in an online class, right? And I'm sorry about this numbering here. This should not be a 4. This should be a 2. And this should not be a 5. Obviously, it should be a 3. So where do you get presentation stuff? You can do a PowerPoint, and if you do a PowerPoint, you can either submit your slides or you can print them as a PDF and send those to me in the slot where you turn in your presentation. The other option is you can do Google Slides. If you do your presentation on Google Slides, make sure that you publish it first. And again, if you're not familiar with Google Slides, you've not used it before, I would encourage you maybe to fall back on PowerPoint. Okay, so I have to do a PowerPoint. How is this going to work? You will compose a PowerPoint and you will turn it in to me electronically. You do not need to show up and give a speech. You do not need to write a paper. You just have to put together a presentation that helps to answer some or answer some of these, how should I put it? You're going to put together a presentation whose structure is going to correspond to this outline right here, 1 through 6. So the first thing you'll do is you'll tell me exactly what the claim is. So if you're doing a presentation on werewolves, right? When was the last credible werewolf sighting anywhere in the history of the world? Well, you'll have to look into that, and you'll have to find out the last credible sighting of a werewolf in the world was in 1656 in Germany, where blah, blah, blah. I just made that number up. I don't know when the last credible sighting was. But if that's what you're doing, your first slide will tell me, right? This happened. So if you are writing on magnet therapy, you will start your presentation with magnet therapy is an alternative treatment to cure blah, 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 right? Then the next thing you'll do is you'll tell me, is this an extraordinary claim? By the way, most of the time this answer is going to be yes. Most of the time the answer will be yes. So this is important because if you do not say that this is an extraordinary claim, then the claim can just be adopted by anecdote or story and you're done, right? So usually these claims are going to be a little bit more extraordinary, and that's going to put the burden of proof on the person who thinks that this particular whatever it is real, right? So if my claim is that ghosts are haunting the Queen Mary, then I'm going to say the Queen Mary, currently moored in Long Beach, California, is haunted by the ghost of a young girl in the pool, right? In the pool area, in the indoor pool. Then you will do your next slide or slides, right? If you do 2 slides on the claim, that's perfectly fine. If you do 3, that's fine. This is just to give you a background and a structure to do it. 2, history or context of the claim. This is where you get to have a little bit of fun. Half of what makes these stories interesting is the stories behind them, the people who are involved in them, how they all come together. So take a little bit of time and make sure that you understand the context. You don't want to investigate a claim and then not understand that this was extraordinary because nobody had phones at the time or something like that. Make sure that you understand the context of the claim. So if this is someone who's claiming to be psychic, at the time, was this something that a lot of people were claiming? Was this part of a fad? Was this part of something that people thought was going to be worthwhile? So for a while, people thought coffee enemas would cure cancer, right? So people started doing all these coffee enemas. Well, you would explain, well, this was part of a craze that people sought as an alternative medical treatment in the 80s. And there were other things like this, but lots of people were doing this. And so although, right, you just want to give me some background as to what's going on. The next thing you're going to do is evaluate the source for the claim. So this can be any combination of these 3 for your slide. Are there credible sources for the claim? So a great example of this would be the Bell Witch, right? What's the source for the Bell Witch? Well, one person who writes the book, writes a book about it maybe 80 years later or many, many years later. So they're, only having one source for an event or a phenomenon makes that a little bit less credible. If it is a person who's making this claim, does this person have any education or experience that would allow them to make this claim very meaningfully or in a way that carries more weight than if I said it? So for instance, if you were doing a project on UFOs and you were looking at the sources involved, who saw this UFO, right? Well, it would be one thing if a town drunk saw this UFO at 2 a.m. at night, right? And another thing if the governor of the state saw this thing along with 200 other people, right? Contemporaneously, like what happened in the Phoenix Lights case. So you want to make sure that you understand where your claim is coming from and convey that to me. Next up, identify alternatives. What else could it have been, right? Could it have been some kind of oddity in the world of nature or numbers? Is it a perceptual error? If I'm talking about a UFO, could it have been a cloud? Could it have been a light, a plane, a reflection, a sundog, a cumulus cloud? Any number of things it could have been, let me know. Could it be that someone's remembering a story wrong? So memory error. The classic example of this is in Roswell. A mortician named Glenn Dennis has all these fantastic stories about bodies and these aliens walking around with these huge heads and so forth. And it turns out most of these stories that Glenn Dennis tells can be traced back to faulty memories that he's having. He's remembering things at the wrong time. He's remembering air accidents that actually did happen, and he's conflating those things with alien, extraterrestrial crashes. So do your best, because this is where much of your analysis is going to be, right? Oh, it could be, something in the sky, something in your eyes, something in your mind, blah, blah, blah. Next, what do you think, right? Tell me on slide 5 or whatever slide it is in your presentation. If it's 7 or 8 because you have a couple of extra slides up here, that's fine. Tell me what you think the evidence supports. Do you think that the burden has been met? It may come as a huge surprise to you guys, but lots of people investigate stuff and they say, I understand the content of the course and I understand the evidence presented here, and I actually think there's good evidence to think that maybe this did occur, right? I don't need to know. I'm not going to grade you on what you think, but I want to know, right? Because I think it gives me insight into your mind. And so remember, you're not graded on where you come down. If you think Tupac is alive, absolutely great, more power to you. I'm not losing any sleep at all over it, right? But I want to know. Okay, and then lastly, just give me a slide that tells me what your sources are. Here are a couple of good skeptical sources that might help keep you on the straight and narrow, only because sometimes when you start investigating some of these paranormal claims, they have so many sites that are devoted to them that are just pro-paranormal that it can be difficult to find, that balance and find the other side of the story and to give it adequate treatment. And you're not limited to using these resources, but you can if you'd like. Okay, the thing that you want to know the most about. Grading. Here's how your grading breaks down. 50% on the content of the presentation, 50% on how the presentation looks. So the content of the presentation is, did you do these 6 things, right? Did you talk about the claim? Did you talk about the context? Did you evaluate the support for the claim? Did you look at alternatives for the claim? What do you think happened? And what sources did you use? If you answer 1 through 6, you're good to go. If you have enough information there, you're good to go. Did you entertain both sides of the issue? Not having enough information would be something like claim. Tupac Shakur is still alive. Context. This happened sometime before now, right? That's not enough information. Tell me when it happened, where it happened, right? Let me know the basics of what happened. You don't need to go into a super long evaluation, and you don't need to cram the text on the font on the slide to be really small. But give me, 3 or 4 major details about the event. That'll be fine. Presentation. This is the part of the presentation, which reflects how your project looks. So, did you make sure that you don't have any typos? Nothing kind of sinks you faster than having an awesome presentation, but you've spelled ghost wrong in the very first slide, right? And it happens. I send stuff out with typos all the time, so I'm really sympathetic to it. But because this is a final project, please do your best to remove those typos and those grammatical errors. Also, you don't need to spend tons of time looking to find great pictures and it does not have to be perfect. Most of us are not graphic artists, and I'm not expecting you guys to be. But make sure that it looks clean and professional. Okay? If you guys have any questions on it, please let me know. But essentially, it is a 6 plus or minus, right? So probably, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15 slides would be sufficient. 6 is technically enough. It would just depend on your presentation. I would not go over something like 15. If you really feel like you want to, you can, but don't kill yourself on this project, right? Just see that you do a good job with what you do turn in. Okay? Again, if you guys have any questions or comments, please, please, please feel free to email me.